Do you know what it feels like to be kicked out of your own son's wedding by the bride herself and right in front of hundreds of guests? I do. And it shattered me. My name is Eleanor Harris. I'm 66 years old, a simple widow, and yet somehow I became the villain in the story I paid for. I spent everything I had, my husband's life insurance, my lifelong savings, even took out a second mortgage on my home, just to make my son's dream wedding come true. And in return, I was met with 4 ice-cold words. You're not invited. Silence. The laughter stopped. The champagne froze midair. Dozens of faces turned toward me as if I didn't belong there. I wanted to scream. I wanted to disappear. But most of all, I wanted the truth. Because here's what that bride didn't know. I wasn't there to cause trouble. I wasn't there to beg. I wasn't even there for forgiveness. I came to end it. And in that moment when everyone thought I walked away in shame, the truth was I had only just begun. This isn't just a story about betrayal. This is about a mother who fought back. A mother who refused to bow her head. A mother who turned heartbreak into revenge. A wedding fell apart that night. But from the ashes came a lesson that changed everything. So if you're ready to hear the truth, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because when you reach the end, you'll understand what I learned the hard way. Sometimes the most beautiful weddings are the ones that never happen. They say there's no pain greater than being rejected by your own family. But I've tasted something far crueler, being thrown out of my own son's wedding by my future daughter-in-law in front of 300 guests under glittering crystal chandeliers, while a live orchestra from New York played soft, elegant notes in the background. My name is Eleanor Harris, 66 years old, a widow who spent her entire life taking care of her family. And that was how the happiest day of my son's life became the most humiliating day of mine. The scene was like a painting drawn with too much perfection. Massive arches made of white roses stretched across the ballroom. Golden wine shimmered in crystal glasses, sparkling under the lights. And there at the very center of it all stood the bride, Clara Jennings, in a wedding gown worth 10 times my retirement savings. She looked straight into my eyes and whispered words that sliced sharper than any blade. You're not invited. The air froze. Whispers buzzed through the hall like a swarm of angry bees. Hands covered mouths. Phones came up to record. And then, every pair of eyes turned to me, the unwanted mother standing there like an intruder. I smiled. A bitter, restrained smile. I'd spent nearly 40 years of my life learning how to swallow pain in silence, from the nights I sat beside my husband's hospital bed during his cancer treatments, to the years I worked 2 jobs just to keep a roof over my son's head. So no, this wasn't the blow that would break me. I gently placed my champagne glass on the table. My simple black dress brushed against the marble floor as I turned to leave. I could hear my heels clicking in the silence, each sound echoing like a funeral drum, mourning the happiness I thought I could buy, with everything I had left. Some guests shook their heads, whispering words of pity. Others smirked with satisfaction. And Clara, oh, Clara, stood tall, her sapphire eyes glittering with triumph, convinced she had defeated me. But if the story ended there, it would have been nothing more than a forgettable tragedy. And I was never meant to be a supporting character in my own life, because I didn't come to this wedding to prove whether I belonged. I came to prove something far greater, that the truth, no matter how deeply buried beneath layers of silk and lies, always finds its way to the surface. I took a few slow steps forward, then stopped. I turned my head and looked at my son. Michael Harris, 34 years old, stood in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, his face glowing with the blind happiness only love can create. His eyes flickered to me, awkward, conflicted, ashamed, then quickly returned to the woman he believed was the love of his life. And in that moment I knew he had chosen her. So be it. Let the truth choose its own path. I drew in a deep breath, steadying the tremor in my chest. Then I raised my head, letting my voice cut through the silence like church bells. Very well, I'll leave. But before I go, allow me to introduce you to an old friend. A very special guest. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I saw Clara freeze, the triumphant smile faltering ever so slightly. Michael frowned, confused, not yet understanding what was about to happen. And then, from the far end of the hall, the doors opened. A man stepped inside. Not a guest in a polished tuxedo. Not a relative from the groom's side. Not anyone expected. No, it was a face Clara swore she'd never see again. The room fell silent, as if someone had drained all the air from it. The pristine white of Clara's wedding gown suddenly looked pale against the ghostly color of her face. The man walked up slowly, stopping just behind me. I didn't have to say a word. His presence alone was enough to turn Clara to stone. I turned my head slightly, letting a quiet, mocking smile curve my lips, not out of pain, but out of satisfaction. Who was this man? And why did his arrival shake this perfect wedding, like a sandcastle crumbling beneath a storm? I'll tell you, but not yet. Because to understand why I dared to walk into this lavish wedding and turn everything upside down, you need to know where it all began. 6 months ago. Perhaps there's nothing more ironic than watching your own child's love turn into the very trap that buries a mother's entire lifetime of savings. I used to believe the money I poured into their wedding was simply a gift, a way to open a new chapter for my son. But slowly, I realized it was the price of an illusion. After my husband died of cancer, I lived alone in our small suburban home on the outskirts of Charleston. Years of hard work had left me with modest savings, plus a little insurance money he'd left behind. I never spent it on myself. I thought, at the very least, when Michael finally got married, I could stand proudly by his side on his happiest day, watching him build the family we'd always dreamed of. The day Michael introduced Clara to me, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen since his father passed away. Light. My son, 34 years old, an accountant, quiet and simple, had never truly loved anyone deeply. And then there was Clara, with her golden hair, her sweet, careful smile, and her tragic yet inspiring story, an orphan who'd fought her way up to become a pediatric nurse. She brought a color into his life that I believed he deserved. Mom, she's everything I ever wanted, Michael told me the first time he brought her home. His voice carried that fragile mix of pride and fear, like a little boy showing off his favorite toy, terrified someone might take it away. Clara sat next to him, holding his hand, her eyes glistening with emotion. Mrs. Harris, she said softly, meeting you feels like a dream. You're like the mother I never had. I was stunned. My heart melted like wax under a flame. This young woman didn't just love my son. She wanted a family. For a moment, I thought I had found the daughter I never had. And because I believed in that dream, I made the biggest financial decision of my life. I withdrew every penny of my late husband's insurance payout. I sold off the bonds he had set aside for emergencies. And then I signed a second mortgage on my little house, just to cover the $38,000 Clara said she needed for her dream wedding she'd been planning since childhood. White roses imported from South America. A $12,000 wedding gown, altered 3 separate times to perfection. The venue, the Bellamy Estate, the kind of place people whispered about with awe. I didn't hesitate. Not once. Every check I signed felt like signing my son's happiness into existence. But here's the thing about illusions. The cracks always show, if you look closely enough. It started small, like hairline fractures in glass that only catch the light at the right angle. Clara always used cash. A young woman in today's world who never touched a credit card. Odd. Her childhood stories were equally inconsistent. She said she'd grown up drifting from state to state, but every time she told it, the details changed. One moment it was Maine. The next, she swore she'd lived in Florida. Her life sounded less like a story and more like a patchwork quilt, stitched together from borrowed pieces. And the thing that unsettled me most, Clara rarely mentioned her family. Whenever I asked, she would simply shake her head, lowering her eyes, and whisper, "They're gone. All I have now is Michael. And you." It sounded tragic. It sounded touching. It also sounded too perfect. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe this was real pain, wounds too deep for her to reopen. Maybe I was just an insecure widow, afraid of losing the last place I held in my son's heart. So I buried my doubts, smothering them under a simple truth. If Michael was happy, I should be happy too. One night I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by towering stacks of wedding invoices. I stared at the numbers, the endless checks, the draining savings, and laughed bitterly to myself. Decades of hard work, and here I was, buying a single shining day for a woman I had only known a few months. But then I whispered to myself, at least Michael will have a family. At least he won't be alone, like me. I tried to believe that. I really did. Until the night, everything shattered. That evening, I stopped by Michael's apartment to drop off some wedding favors I'd ordered. I had a spare key. I turned it in the lock, ready to call out his name, but I froze. Voices carried from the bedroom. Clara's voice. Soft, hurried, sharp. I stood motionless in the hallway, my chest tightening. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but my feet refused to move. "Derek, I told you not to call me here," Clara hissed, her voice low but cutting. "Yes, the wedding's on track." "Don't worry. I'll have access to his accounts once we're married." "What do you mean you want a bigger cut? We agreed on 30%. I felt my blood turn to ice. The gift box slipped from my hands and hit the floor with a soft thud, but in my ears it roared like thunder. Clara, the woman I had trusted with everything, was plotting a con. And the mark, the target, was my son. My heart pounded in my chest, my breath stuck somewhere between panic and disbelief. Every doubt I had ever dismissed, every tiny inconsistency I'd brushed aside, suddenly aligned into one brutal, undeniable picture. When Clara hung up, I stepped back slowly, quietly, like a ghost retreating from a crime scene. I left Michael's apartment without a word. In that moment, I stopped being the naive mother who signed checks and swallowed sweet lies. I had heard the truth with my own ears. And from that second on, I knew my son's future, his happiness, and every dollar I had risked were dangling on the edge of a cliff. But hearing the truth wasn't enough. I needed proof. I needed someone who could help me rip the mask off Clara, and so I did something I never thought I would do. I hired a private investigator. Sometimes, the truth doesn't kick the door open. It doesn't scream. It slips in quietly, like a shadow crawling under the cracks, gentle to the touch, but leaving wounds that never heal. That night was exactly like that. I drove to Michael's apartment carrying a small box of wedding favors. Tiny glass jars of handmade honey, wrapped in clear cellophane, tied with silver ribbons, each box a token of love I had ordered from a family-owned farm. I imagined the guests smiling as they opened them, remembering the dream wedding, the wedding I had bled myself dry to make possible. The apartment door was slightly ajar. Michael wasn't home yet. I knew, because at this hour he was almost always still buried in spreadsheets at the office. I figured I'd just leave the box on the kitchen counter and slip out quietly. But the moment my hand touched the doorknob, I froze. A voice. A woman's voice. Soft, hurried, tense. Dirk, I told you not to call me here. My entire body went still. That voice belonged to Clara. My heartbeat stumbled hard and uneven. I'm not the kind of person who eavesdrops. But there was something in her tone, sharp, controlled, almost calculating, that made my breath catch. It wasn't the voice of a woman in love. It was the voice of someone setting up a play. I crept down the hallway, careful not to make a sound. The old hardwood floors groaned beneath me, each creak screaming my guilt, but I kept going, pressing myself against the wall, following her voice like a thread. Yes, the wedding's on track. Don't worry. I'll have access to his accounts once we're married. My stomach turned to stone. I heard her pacing inside the bedroom, heels tapping lightly against the floor. What do you mean you want a bigger cut? We agreed on 30%. Silence. Then, a low, bitter laugh from Clara, the kind of laugh that slices you open without leaving a mark. His mom already gave us almost 40 grand. This mark is worth at least 200K, maybe more. Mark. One word. One single ugly word I didn't need a dictionary to understand. Mark. Target. Victim. And the victim was my son. The gift box slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a soft thud. Tiny, harmless. Yet in my ears, it thundered like a gunshot. I stood frozen in the hallway, my pulse hammering, my breath shallow and broken. Sweat trickled down my back like melting ice. In one instant, every little doubt I had ever brushed aside, the cash payments, the shifting backstories, the perfectly rehearsed tragedies, all of it locked into place like a puzzle snapping shut. The sweet smiles, the watery eyes, the orphan tale, the pediatric nurse. It was all theater. Clara wasn't who she claimed to be. She wasn't a loving fiancée. She wasn't a nurse. She wasn't an orphan. She was a professional con artist. I wanted to burst into that room, rip the phone from her hand, scream the truth into Michael's face. But I didn't, because I knew what would happen. Michael was in love, blinded. In his eyes, I'd look like the jealous, bitter mother, the one trying to sabotage his happiness. And Clara, with those glassy, innocent eyes, would turn my fury into evidence of my paranoia. I wouldn't just lose him, I'd push him straight into her arms. So I stepped back. one slow, trembling step at a time. I turned away from the door, my legs unsteady, carrying me down the hall like a sleepwalker. Down the stairs, out into the parking lot. By the time I collapsed into the driver's seat, my hands were shaking so violently I couldn't fit the key into the ignition. And then I cried. Hot tears spilled onto the steering wheel, burning my skin like acid. Not just because of the money, not just because of the exhaustion, but because for the first time in my life, I saw my son, my only son, reduced to a mark, a number, a payday. I sat there in the dark, listening to the muffled hum of passing cars, feeling my heart pound out of rhythm, and in that silence, something inside me broke. But something else woke up. The part of me I thought I'd buried 3 years ago, the part of me that once fought through my husband's cancer, worked myself raw to keep a roof over our heads, and clawed my way through every storm life threw at us. That woman wasn't dead, and she wasn't going to let a white dress and a pretty face destroy her son's life. But anger wasn't enough. Tears weren't enough. If I wanted to stop Clara, I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof. Not whispers. Not instinct. Something concrete. Something no one could deny. A mask always falls eventually, but sometimes you need the right hand to pull it down. I wiped my tears away, forcing my breath steady, and in that moment, I knew I couldn't fight this battle alone. I needed an ally. Someone who understood this game better than I did. Someone who knew how to expose people like Clara for who they really were. That night I sat in my car until long past midnight, gripping the steering wheel like it was a lifeline, whispering a vow into the darkness. I will not let my son become her prey. I will find the truth. And when the truth rises, no amount of charm or crocodile tears will save her. And so the very next morning, I did something I never thought I'd do. I opened my old laptop, typed 3 words into Google, and hit enter. Charleston private investigator. I had no idea then. That single decision would open the first move of a game I was about to play to the very end. The next morning, I sat in front of my husband's old computer, the one he used to work from home before the cancer took him. The keys were worn smooth. The screen trembled faintly with every keystroke. And there I was, typing 3 words I never thought I'd search for in my entire life. Private Investigator Charleston. The list of results stretched endlessly, like a digital phone book. Faces of men in tailored suits, posing with mysterious smiles under cheap studio lights, each one advertising confidential solutions. But then, my eyes stopped. One name. One photo. Patricia Lane. No polished slogan. No airbrushed headshot. Just a grainy picture of a middle-aged woman with her hair pulled back and eyes as sharp and unyielding as steel. I dialed her number. We agreed to meet at a small cafe downtown, a quiet place that smelled faintly of roasted beans and worn leather. Patricia arrived exactly on time, carrying a weathered leather notebook and an old fountain pen that had seen too many secrets. She didn't waste a second. "Mrs. Harris," she said, her voice low and steady, "talk to me. I need everything." And so I told her. From the day Clara walked into my son's life to the whispering phone call I overheard the night before. Every detail, every bruise on my trust, every red flag I had ignored. Patricia didn't interrupt once. She sat silently, scribbling quick notes, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she finally looked up, meeting my eyes with a gaze that felt surgical. What you're describing, she said calmly, sounds like a classic romance scam. This isn't her first game. She's a professional. I swallowed hard. My throat felt dry. Who is she? Patricia leaned back slightly, her lips curving into the faintest, coldest smile. Give me 2 weeks, she said. I'll show you her real face. 2 weeks of silence. Those 2 weeks stretched like 2 years. Every time Michael called to ask for my opinion on wedding plans, I bit back words that clawed at my throat. Every time Clara's name came up, I forced myself to smile, pretending everything was fine. At night, sleep betrayed me. I'd wake, heart racing, seeing Clara in her white wedding gown, smiling at me with predatory sweetness. Then one afternoon, the phone rang. Patricia's voice was low, deliberate, and sharp as a blade. Mrs. Harris, I think you should sit down. I was already seated at the kitchen table, fingers wrapped tightly around a cup of tea, palms damp with sweat. Tell me, I whispered. Patricia didn't pause. Claire Jennings doesn't exist. Her real name is Sophie Clark, 29 years old, born in Tampa. She's been arrested 3 times in the last 5 years, all for fraud. 1 suspended sentence. 2 cases dropped thanks to high-powered lawyers. Her record's a mile long. And Mrs. Harris, Patricia's voice hardened. That man you heard on the phone, Derek, is her former partner in crime. The room tilted around me. My chest clenched. I gripped the edge of the table, holding myself upright. And my son? I managed to breathe out. Patricia didn't soften her words. He's just her new mark. Sophie changes names, jobs, addresses, even social security numbers. That pediatric nurse story, fake. The orphan backstory, scripted. Everything about her is manufactured. My hand slipped. The teacup fell, shattering against the tile. I didn't even flinch. Every sacrifice, every dollar, every ounce of trust, shattered like porcelain on the floor. Patricia continued, her tone like a prosecutor reading an indictment. Derek Walker, she said, her former partner and former lover. 2 years ago, she disappeared on him with $15,000 of his cash. Since then, he's been tracking her down. I clenched my jaw, forcing air into my lungs. You found him? Patricia nodded once. Atlanta, he's working construction now. But Mrs. Harris, I need to warn you. He's not clean. If you bring him in, you're stepping into dangerous territory. I closed my eyes, and all I could see was Michael's face, the way he looked at Clara, soft, blinded by love, trusting her more than anyone else in the world. If I didn't act, he would lose everything. Not just money, not just pride, but himself. I opened my eyes, and my voice came out hoarse but steady. I want to meet Derek. Patricia hesitated, surprised, then gave me a smile I couldn't quite read. You're not like the other mothers I've worked with. The call, we called him that afternoon. I still remember his voice, low, rough, cautious. Who's this? My name is Eleanor Harris, I said. I believe you once knew a woman named Sophie Clark. Silence. So long I thought the line had gone dead. Then, a bitter laugh cracked through the speaker. Where? He asked flatly. She's marrying my son. Charleston. 10 days from now. A sharp exhale, almost like a scoff. Then Derek said quietly, almost to himself, she never stops. Always a new mark. I need your help, I said. I need you to help me rip that mask off her, in front of everyone. He paused. When he finally spoke, his tone was warning, not comfort. You're not scared? This woman's dangerous. She knows how to twist everything. Your son will believe her before he ever believes you. I straightened my shoulders, forcing my voice to be steel. Then I'll be the villain. If that's what it takes to save him. Another long silence. Then Derek exhaled, a slow, heavy sigh. All right. I'll come. But understand something, Mrs. Harris. I'm not doing this for you. I want to see her face when she realizes she can't con anyone ever again. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. We have the same goal, and I'll handle the rest. When I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a long, silent moment. The house was still. The clock on the wall ticked like a countdown I couldn't escape. I knew in that instant I had stepped through a door that could never close again. This wasn't just a wedding anymore. It was a battlefield. And Sophie Clark had no idea she was walking straight into it. We made a decision that day, I whispered to myself. That wedding wouldn't be a celebration of love. It would be her final stage. What I didn't know was the price my son and I would both pay to bring her down. From the outside, the plan might have looked like petty revenge. But for me, it was survival. Clara, or rather Sophie Clark, had built herself a perfect illusion. Every detail, every lie, every carefully crafted smile. If I wanted to bring her down, I couldn't just stand up and scream, "She's a fraud." No. I had to burn the stage beneath her feet. And so I started with the money. Step 1, pull the plug. 3 days before the wedding, I picked up my phone and began making calls, one vendor at a time. My voice was warm, soft, and sweet, the voice of a delighted mother eager to celebrate her son's big day. Hi, I'm the groom's mother. There's been a small change in the payment arrangement. The bride's family has decided to cover the remaining costs. They want everything perfect for their daughter. The hotel manager practically squealed with joy. Oh, that's wonderful. Nothing better than families coming together. I smiled, even though the taste of bitterness coated my tongue. Exactly. Please contact them directly at this number. I gave them the number Patricia found, the disposable phone Sophie used for official transactions. A number no one would ever answer. Next I called the florist, then the caterer, then the band, the photographer, the decor team, each time repeating the same warm, sugary script, layering my voice with just enough sweetness to make them believe every word. By the end of the afternoon, tens of thousands of dollars worth of invoices were floating in limbo, with no one standing behind them. A lavish wedding, with its financial foundation quietly yanked out from beneath it. I imagined Sophie's phone lighting up with frantic calls, one after another, as the empire she'd built on lies began to crack. And for the first time in months, I felt a tiny sliver of peace. Like justice had taken one small, trembling step forward. Step 2, the hardest conversation. But the hardest part still waited for me, talking to Michael. That evening I called my son. His voice sounded tired, frayed around the edges. Mom, I'm swamped. Clara's really stressed about the wedding prep. I forced my tone to stay soft, almost fragile. I know, sweetheart. And I've been thinking, maybe I should step back. This is your and Clara's day. If my presence makes either of you uncomfortable, I'll stay away. Silence filled the line. Then finally his voice, husky, heavy. Mom, Claire's just worried you don't like her. She thinks you might ruin our day." The words sliced straight through me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him until he saw the truth. Instead, I swallowed hard, forcing my voice steady. "Then maybe I'll take a little trip. Savannah, maybe. There's this antique shop I've been meaning to visit. You'll have your wedding. No distractions, no drama." His sigh of relief burned like acid. "Thank you, Mom. I know you love me." I closed my eyes, fighting to keep my voice from breaking. "Always, Michael. Always." When the call ended, I sat alone in the dark kitchen, the only sound the steady tick, tick, tick of the old clock on the wall. I had never felt so far from my son. He believed her without question, but doubted me, the woman who raised him, the woman who had fought for him every single day of his life. And now, to save him, I had to become the villain. Step 3. Preparing for war. That night I didn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking of Michael's eyes when he was small, how they used to light up when I read him bedtime stories about heroes and happy endings. I remembered the day he clung to his father's hand at the hospital, whispering, "Dad, please don't go." And I remembered making a silent promise to myself that day. I would protect him no matter what. Now I was about to make good on that promise, even if it cost me everything. I knew stepping into that wedding meant one thing: Michael might never forgive me. He might hate me. He might choose her. But if I stayed silent, he would lose everything: his savings, his dignity, and maybe his faith in love itself. The choice was simple, but it wasn't easy. Step 4, setting the trap. So I made my decision. I would let Sophie, in her perfect white gown, wearing my family's pearls, bathing in the glow of 300 admiring guests, believe she had won. I would let her play her part until the moment she thought she had sealed the deal. And then the truth would rip the silk right off her shoulders. I didn't know how Michael would react. He might hold her. He might defend her until his last breath. He might look at me like I'd lost my mind. But maybe, just maybe, he would finally see what I'd seen all along, that love built on lies will always collapse. I knew, I whispered to myself that night, that when the moment came, I could lose my son forever. Or I could save him right before it was too late, and all of it, everything, would happen on the wedding day. The wedding day arrived like a storm I had seen coming for months, and yet I couldn't stop it. From early morning, the skies over Charleston were heavy and gray. A thin drizzle clung to the windows, as if even nature herself was reluctant to witness what was about to happen. I chose a simple black dress. No jewelry. No makeup. No celebration. A 66-year-old woman sneaking into her own son's wedding. Pathetic, maybe, to anyone watching from the outside. But I wasn't there to mourn. I was there to end the game. I didn't enter through the main doors. Instead, I slipped through the garden path, stone tiles slick beneath my shoes, and followed the narrow walkway leading to a side entrance near the kitchen. I knew this venue better than anyone. I'd been here dozens of times planning this wedding, memorizing every hallway, every hidden corner. The staff were frantic, rushing trays and bouquets through narrow doors, too busy to notice an old woman carrying a small bouquet of her own. Inside the chapel, the soft, solemn notes of the organ filled the chapel, dripping with reverence and melancholy. I hid behind a marble column, close enough to see everything, but far enough to stay unseen. Michael, my son, stood tall at the altar, his tuxedo crisp, his smile blinding, his happiness naive and pure. I had not seen him smile like that since the day his father was alive. My hand clenched tight against my chest, and my heart twisted painfully. In a matter of minutes, that smile would shatter, and I would be the one to break it. The massive wooden doors creaked open. Sophie Clark, stepped inside. The white gown billowed around her like a cloud, lace trailing along the polished stone floor. On her neck glimmered the Harris family pearls, passed down through 4 generations of women, once a symbol of welcome and trust. Today, they felt like chains around my throat. The murmurs faded to silence as she glided forward, the faint click of her heels matching the organ's slow, deliberate rhythm. Michael stared at her, as if witnessing an angel descend. But I saw a predator in disguise. The signal. I pulled out my phone. My fingers trembled, but I managed to type 3 letters. Now. Not even 60 seconds passed before the chapel's back doors burst open. A man strode in, his wrinkled suit rumpled from the road, his face shadowed by sun and years of regret. Derek Walker. Her former partner. Her former lover. The knife I had been hiding in my sleeve. The whispers started instantly, soft at first, then louder, spreading like wildfire. Someone gasped. A glass slipped from trembling hands. Derek didn't pause. He walked straight down the aisle, his voice booming like thunder against stained glass walls. "Sophie Clark!" "You really thought you could run forever?" A ripple of shock froze the room. Clara stopped mid-step. Her hand clenched the white bouquet so tightly that rose petals fell, scattering across the floor. Her flawless makeup paled under the spotlight, cracks forming beneath the surface. Michael stepped forward instantly, placing himself between them like a shield. "Sir, this is a private wedding," he said firmly. "You've got the wrong person." Derek let out a dry, bitter laugh. "Wrong person? All right, let me jog your memory. Her name isn't Clara Jennings. It's Sophie Clark. Professional scam artist. I used to be her partner until she vanished with $15,000 of my money. The fracture. Gasps erupted. A wave of murmurs rolled through the guests. Phones came out. Heads turned. All eyes locked on Clara. "Don't listen to him," Clara screamed, her voice breaking into sobs that seemed rehearsed yet raw. "Andrew, he's lying. He's insane. He's trying to destroy us." I studied her closely. The trembling hands, the uneven breathing, the wild darting of her eyes. The cracks were showing. The mask was slipping. Michael's face shifted from confusion to fear. He glanced from Derek to Clara, back to Derek. Then, in a low, strangled voice, he said, "Clara, or Sophie, is it true?" "Tell me the truth." Clara lunged forward, grabbing his hand, her tears cascading like glass beads onto white silk. "No! Don't listen!" "She's behind this." She whipped around and pointed straight at me, her face contorted with terror and rage. "Your mother is jealous. She's hated me since the beginning. She planned this. She brought this man here to ruin me. Michael, please, can't you see? She wants me gone." Her sobs echoed through the vaulted ceiling, and I watched several guests exchange uneasy glances. Exactly as I feared. Clara's tears were her strongest weapon. And in that moment, I could see my son's resolve trembling. The moment of truth. From behind the marble column, I watched it all unfold, my chest constricting so tightly I could barely breathe. I had prepared for this moment. I had planned every angle, every outcome. But nothing could stop the ache of seeing the woman who tried to ruin us turn my own son against me with a single poisoned sentence. Michael turned to me then. His eyes, conflicted, wounded, angry and confused, locked on mine. And in that heavy silence, I knew one thing. This was it. This moment would decide everything. The room had gone still. Every guest's gaze hung between us, suspended like glass on a thread. Who would Michael believe? His mother, or the woman in white he thought he loved? That choice would save him or destroy him. The air inside the chapel was thick, heavy, suffocating, as if the entire room was holding its breath, waiting for the verdict of an unseen trial. And then Derek, once her partner, now her executioner, played his final card. The evidence. From the inside pocket of his wrinkled jacket, he pulled out a manila folder, snapping it open with deliberate precision. High-resolution photographs spilled into his hand, and he held them up for everyone to see. The first, Sophie, not Clara, caught on camera at a Miami hotel, using a fake credit card at the front desk. The second, Sophie at a Birmingham church, dressed in a cancer patient's gown, holding a donation box she had no right to touch. And the third, Sophie leaving a Memphis hotel room, her bag stuffed with a stolen wallet, a man's watch, and an engagement ring Derek had been stupid enough to buy her. A wave of murmurs surged through the crowd, low at first, then roaring like wind tearing across a dry cornfield. Phones lit up. Cameras rose into the air. Someone whispered, "Is this real?" Another muttered, "This is going to blow up online." Within hours, this dream wedding would be all over social media. The recording, Clara, no, Sophie, trembled, but still tried to fight back. "Fake!" she shrieked. "All of it! He's lying!" "Andrew, you know me. But Derek wasn't done. He pulled out his phone, tapped play, and a recording echoed across the vaulted ceilings. Sophie's voice, sharp, mocking, cutting like a knife. The old bat is so desperate for grandchildren, she'll believe anything. And her son? Complete mama's boy. Easy money. The chapel erupted. Gasps. Shouts. Hushed voices colliding in disbelief. Some guests turned to look at me, some with pity, others with shock. And in my mind, one phrase repeated like a cruel refrain, "Lonely old woman." The shattering. Michael turned to Clara, and the light in his eyes, that bright, blinding happiness, flickered and died. His lips trembled. He stepped forward, hands shaking, and reached for the necklace around her throat. The Harris family pearls, 4 generations of love, trust, and legacy. With a single deliberate motion, he unfastened the clasp and pulled them free. A soft click broke the silence. But to me, it was the sound of an entire world collapsing. Michael held the pearls in his hand, his voice raw, breaking. "Is it true?" 3 words. But they carried every ounce of betrayal, every crack in his heart. Clara froze. Her breath hitched. And then, finally, the facade crumbled. Tears spilled down her face, but they were no longer sweet or charming. Her mascara streaked black trails across her cheeks as her voice fractured. I didn't mean." It started as a job. The entire room stilled. Even the whispers fell silent. Michael staggered back, clutching the pearls like a weapon, his expression collapsing from shock into fury. A job? Our love, our marriage, was just a job to you. Clara's knees gave out. She fell onto the polished stone floor, her pristine white gown spilling around her, like a broken halo. The angel was gone. In her place sat a con artist, mask shattered before 300 witnesses. The arrest, but the nightmare wasn't over. The chapel doors slammed open. 2 men in black suits strode in, badges flashing, their voices cutting through the chaos. Sophie Clark, FBI. You're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and multiple federal violations. The chapel exploded. Guests gasped, shouted, and scrambled. Chairs scraped violently against marble floors. Several phones shot up, live streams already going live. Someone whispered, "This is insane at a wedding." Sophie fought back, thrashing wildly, screaming through her tears. "No! This is harassment! Andrew, help me! She set me up! Your mother set me up!" But Michael didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe. He stood frozen, his face pale, his eyes blank. In his hand, the Harris pearls glimmered beneath the chapel lights, cold and heavy, like chains binding him to the ruins of his own heart. The agents cuffed Sophie, right there at the altar. The wedding music, still faintly echoing from the organ, sounded like a cruel joke. Her white gown dragged against the stone floor as they led her away. To me, it looked less like a bride's train and more like a burial shroud. The fallout. I stood in the shadows, hands trembling, my chest tight and heavy. I had won. I had exposed her. I had saved my son. But in that moment, I felt no victory. Only devastation. The wedding had become a graveyard. And my son stood among the ashes. Guests began to scatter, murmuring as they filed out. I knew she was too perfect. Poor Michael. That mother, though, she saw it coming, but the voices blurred together, fading into an indistinct hum. All I could see was Michael, head bowed, clutching the pearls in his hand, like they were the last piece of himself he could still hold on to. And in that moment, I knew one truth. The con was over. The wedding was over. But the scars this day left would take far longer to heal. The wedding shattered in an instant. My son lost the woman he thought he loved, and I might have lost his trust forever. Now, standing in the wreckage, I can only ask myself one question. When the smoke clears, will a mother's love be enough to bring him back? They say a wedding without a bride isn't a wedding at all. But that afternoon in Charleston, we proved them wrong. When Sophie was led away by the FBI in her wrinkled white gown, the chapel fell silent. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. And then, slowly, the tension cracked like thin glass. A few guests sighed in relief. Someone chuckled under their breath. And then a voice rose from the back. "Well, the food's still here." Laughter rippled through the room. Within minutes, the chaos melted into celebration. The so-called wedding reception transformed into something else entirely, not a ceremony, not an elegant toast to love, but an after-party born out of shock. People poured into the ballroom. The band tossed aside the wedding classics and switched to blues. Glasses clinked. Laughter echoed. Strangers swapped theories over champagne. and someone, already half drunk, proclaimed it. The most unforgettable wedding in town, and they weren't wrong. No one would ever forget this day. The conversation. I sat quietly in the corner, watching Michael walk in. My son's shoulders were stiff, his posture straight, but I could see the weight pressing down on him. All eyes followed him, sympathy tangled with curiosity. But instead of collapsing, Michael moved with quiet dignity. He walked from table to table, shaking hands, thanking guests, his voice steady even as his heart bled. A man who had just lost his bride, but somehow looked stronger than ever. Finally, he stopped in front of me. In his hand, the Harris family pearls gleamed coldly under the golden ballroom lights. He held them out, his voice rough, breaking at the edges. "Mom, I'm sorry. I was blind. I chose her over you. I thought you were jealous, controlling. I was wrong. I took the pearls, feeling the familiar weight settle into my palm like an old scar. I reached up, touching his cheek, the way I used to when he was small. You weren't foolish, son. You were targeted. There's a difference. A liar studied you, learned what you needed, and became that person. That's not your failure. That's her crime." Michael's lips trembled. His eyes glistened, but he nodded, as if at last the burden had been lifted. A toast in shadows. Just then Derek walked over, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his voice raspy but sincere. "Mrs. Harris, I wanted to thank you. If it weren't for you, I'd never have had the chance to face Sophie again. You gave me closure." I laughed, a dry, brittle sound that surprised even me. Closure. Funny how we call it that, when what we really wanted was revenge. Derek smirked, nodding slowly. "Maybe. But either way, she won't scam anyone else for a long, long time." Then he lifted his glass, his eyes steady. "To mothers who don't back down." I clinked my glass against his. Not in celebration, not in victory, but because he was right. A different kind of ending. That night, as laughter spilled across the ballroom and the blues hummed softly beneath the chatter, I stood beside my son. I raised my champagne glass, looked straight at him, and with a wry, bittersweet smile, I whispered, "Sometimes the best weddings are the ones that never happen." Michael's laugh broke free, a fragile, shaky sound, but real. And in that moment, I knew the truth. We had lost so much, but we had kept the one thing that mattered most. Trust. Between mother and son. The next shadow. I'm not a hero. I never wanted to be one. I'm just a mother. A mother willing to become the villain, if that's what it takes, to keep her child safe. But deep down, I know one thing. The world isn't short on predators. There will always be people who wear the mask of love, just to devour those desperate enough to believe in it. And Michael, even now, is still that man. Kind. Hopeful. A heart that craves love so deeply, he can't always see the danger in front of him. I can't protect him forever. I know that. And I thought, foolishly, that this was the end of our battle. But I was wrong. Because a few months later, another face appeared. Another sweet smile. Another promise of forever. And once again, I had to prepare myself. Because this fight was far from over. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps us bring more powerful stories of empathy, justice, and silent strength to life. Your support is what fuels this journey. Let's keep standing together and rising higher one story at a time. Stay safe and inspired.